What's up, Scyushi Squad? We are back in more Trove, and today we're going to be talking about the Vanguard. I always call him Vanguard. Technically, the character's name is Vanguardian. What is he guardian of? The van? That was broken English. Anyways, so hi, how you doing? First and foremost, how does this character handle itself at the end game? Well, generally speaking, you're going to be using this character as a speed farmer. It does have ranged mode, but you're not really going to use that. You're primarily going to use your #1 ability in melee mode because it gives you more more movement speed, and that's basically it. And then as far as damage is concerned, you just go into dungeons and laser the heck out of everything. It all dies right away. Otherwise, you can end up just using your normal punches. Now, not to imply that ranged mode is useless, but it's useless. They did end up buffing ranged mode with the Shadowhunter update, the Shadowhunter rework update, but generally speaking, it's still not really something that you want to end up using too much. Like, it just, I don't know about any of that stuff, man. But you're gonna have a lot of movement speed on this guy, and generally speaking, the difference between Vanguard and Neon Ninja is you're gonna be significantly slower, yes. However, you will be able to look forward when you're going places. And generally speaking, Vanguard is still a very, very speedy character. So as far as the subclass ability is concerned, generally you probably want to use the Lunar Lancer subclass ability because when it can trigger, you'll end up going big mode and then you get more movement speed, which is obviously very, very nice. However, I always err on the side of caution, and I like to use mounted cavalry. The reason why is because sometimes you need to use a mount, and especially with the Vanguardian, you're probably going to be using Volatile Bounder, which is pretty much the best mount in the entire game from Bomber Royale Season 3. It bounces you way up into the air. It's better than Gonda just because of that. But when you're on a mount, you're not going to end up having that much movement speed, and so that's why I always use a Knight subclass ability. However, for raw damage, that would probably just be the Solarian subclass ability now that we've got that in the game, just because it gives you the light value and the little Phoenix ally and stuff like that. But generally speaking, you can kind of experiment. It's not really something you need to be too picky about. The Lunar one should be fine. And then as far as the stats on all of your gear is concerned, ignoring everything that I've got, except for the fist, that's proper. You're going to have attack speed, movement speed as all of your stats, no matter what. In the odd chance that you're trying to use Vanguard for damage, you might swap movement speed for crit damage, but why would you ever do that when you have other classes that are going to do bosses so much better than Vanguard? Vanguard is focused on speed, and that's it. However, you can end up doing Delves at a pretty decent pace. It's the bosses where the class kind of suffers, just because you're really, really good at bursts because of the laser, but then as soon as you're out of your RNG, it's like, oh, okay. So I would actually recommend that you have an RNG regen ring to kind of compensate for the fact that you're going to be using your laser so often. Only, most of all, primarily focusing on Delves and stuff, because when you're speed farming, you're going to be up in the air, and every time you jump, your energy won't end up recharging until a short duration after you've jumped. It's just a weird way Trove works. Now, as far as the hidden ring effect is concerned, this is a Tomb Raiser ring, so ignore that. We'll go through the 3 different abilities, and I'll tell you the best one. So, Champions Congregate. So, Fired Up and Force Flash, which is going to end up being your #1 ability in both melee mode and ranged mode. They now apply up to 2 nearby allies when used. So you are basically going to do this, and it's going to give movement speed to your other buddies and stuff. And if you're in range mode, it gives you attack speed, which can end up being a pretty nice support ability. But we all know you're farming solo anyway, so why would you ever end up using this? Unless, you know, you're chilling with your friends or whatever. But frankly speaking, Vanguard's going to be so fast that you probably won't be able to stick around with your friends. Unless there's an unlimited amount to that buff. I know there isn't. I just think that would be really cool. Wouldn't that be awesome if you could have 50 Vanguards all stacked together to get the ability? But anyways, Combo is the next ability. So Energy Blast now applies the same damage increase that Eye Lasers applies, which, if you'll notice right here, that is actually going to end up being the right-click ability in ranged mode. They call it, so it's Plasma Blast, but they say Energy Blast in the patch notes that I'm reading here. But either way, another superfluous ability because it is only utilized in ranged mode, which kind of sucks. And then Heroes Stand. So Laser Leap and Heroes Charge. These are not, you know, when you use your ultimate either in melee mode or ranged mode, so swapping between back and forth. grants a buff that heals while dealing damage for a short time, which I don't know. I guess I would take combo, just because then you would at least have somewhat decent damage in ranged mode, or probably Hero's Stand. Frankly speaking, I wouldn't use any of these abilities. They kind of suck, but I don't know. Beggars can't be choosers. If you have to pick one, Hero's Stand, probably. I don't know. Any of you guys know, like, is there some secret trick to one of these abilities that's just busted or something? If so, sound off in the comments, because I don't really mess with these hidden ring effects when they look so bad. And then the banner, you can use the Nitro banner, but generally speaking, you're going to be aiming for the Leviathan banners, or the Leviathan torches, which are going to end up giving you the highest light value. The light value being the armor penetration that you need for the end game, so it's kind of a mandatory stat. And then for defeating Leviathans, you'll basically be able to get a daily torch that expires after a day, weekly torches which last for a week, and then the permanent torch, which is the rarest torch in the game, super duper hard to get from Leviathans, which is a torch that just never despawns, which is your best option. And then for the ally, you're going to end up having quite a few options. So for the Delves allies, these are going to kind of be the standard ones, which is going to be Animated Jug because of that movement speed. You could use Jingles in combination with the Hero's Stand hidden ring effect, just because this will end up making it so that you can use your ult more. But again, you are primarily using this character as a speedster. But the other options is Raptor Berserker if you don't have a Delve ally, and then there's going to end up being Ernie is another ally that is going to end up being the highest damage ally in the game for a physical character, but not necessarily something you would want to end up using on this guy. And then there's also going to end up being the Golden Horde Dragonling, which gives you increased cooldown, but I don't know. You don't really want the cooldown reduction, and frankly speaking, those Delve allies are just so cheap anyways, it's fine and doesn't really matter. Your food item, I don't even know why I have these. Food doesn't matter, just use the food item that gives you the most light. For your emblems, you're going to be using Trailblazing as a must, but most of all that's Endgame, because otherwise Trailblazing, Martial are kind of the standard. You can end up using Unyielding if you want. Zealous is going to end up being pretty good, just because if you want to have high amounts of damage, you would basically spam your lasers, use a pot, spam your lasers, and then otherwise Chromatic if you wanted to cycle in and out of your ult, but generally speaking, why would you ever want to? Sure Strike is going to be used if you are a lower tiered character with not that much crit hit. Now, before we end up, before we move forward, we got to talk about the Flask. Actually, I was about to move on to the stats. So for the Flask, I mean, Death Defiance just kind of the standard. We all know that, right? Like, there's not really an AR option. You can experiment and try stuff out if you want, and maybe you think something works better for you, but Death Defying is kind of just the standard because everything one-shots you at the end game. Now, as I was about to say, before we end up talking about the different stats that you can get on your gems and so on and so forth, I'll give you kind of a rough estimate of here's what the mid-game stats you're aiming for are. So your physical damage, you're aiming for 80,000 at the base value at the very least. Your crit hit, 50%. Anything higher than that's great, but you're gonna have to use Sure Strike if you're that low with your crit hit. And then crit damage, you're aiming for 800% and higher. Obviously, the class gem ability is going to be mandatory, so connecting with the final hit of a combo reduces the ability cooldowns slightly, so that's going to end up being your uppercut in melee mode, and then in ranged mode it's going to be your big shot. He shoots a big one every like 3 or 4 hits or something like that. Anyways, I'm going to end up swapping over to the Shadow Hunter so I can show you my gems, because this is the only class that I have a big boy set of physical crystal gems that are fully maxed out. For the Cosmic and Power Gem, you're going to be going for Berserk Battler just because of the damage, or personally, I would recommend Vampirium as the standard, because that's going to end up not only giving you high survivability because of the lifesteal, but more importantly, you are going to get movement speed. Now, the stats that you're aiming for on all of your Cosmic Gems is going to be 3 pearls light, and then no pearls into physical damage or crit damage for the substats. And you are trying to augment these gems as fast as possible, because these gems can be used across all of your physical characters, and they're all going to see the benefits because of how important the light stat value is for the end game. Now, as far as your other empowered gems are concerned, you have a couple options. You can use Pyro Disc just because the movement speed. Cubic Curtain will give you survivability, and if you plan on swapping into ranged mode, Volatile Velocity will increase the range of your attacks by 40%, and then more importantly, you can use Explosive Epilogue to end up making it so that your projectiles end up exploding and it does a lot of damage. I don't know why you would ever want to use range mode. It still is too weak, even though they did end up buffing it a bit with the Shadowhunter rework. Now, as far as the stats on the empowered primary gems, that's going to end up being 2 pearls physical damage, 1 pearl crit damage, and no pearls into crit hit. Only when you end up getting over 100% crit hit can you start sacrificing that stat for max health, because if you have 129% crit hit, you're not seeing the benefit. It's only at 100%. Sometimes you can get to 99%, and that'll still be fine. Now, as far as the lesser gems are concerned, the easiest way I can explain this is a 3x3 ratio. So 3 of these lesser gems are going to be the exact same stats as your empowered gems. So 2 pearls physical, 1 pearl crit damage, and no pearls crit hit. And then the other 3, because there's 6 in total, is going to end up being 2 pearls crit damage, 1 pearl physical, no pearls crit hit. And if there's any fluctuation or variation between those pearls, leaning either more towards crit damage or physical damage, it doesn't really matter that much. Like, it really doesn't end up making as much of a difference as people end up saying it does. Yes, multi using that new swag dragon. But generally speaking, you know, what I'm saying is that you can kind of just use that as a base level, but don't be too picky about it. It's most of all just trying to find a nice balance between both the physical and crit damage without leaning too far into one direction, and then you'll be fine. Anyways, if there's anything that I ended up missing in today's video, you can leave it down in the comments, but generally speaking, I think we covered everything, and yeah, hopefully you ended up finding the video helpful. And if you did, smash like, sub for more, buy the merch you want to support the channel, and have a wonderful day, everybody.